they call Jesus in the gospel today? Teacher. I heard someone say that. That's the answer, right? That's the most common word and phrase and way to address Jesus in all the gospels. And he's called a lot of things, but teacher primarily. So this tells us that this lawyer expected to be taught something from Jesus. He was going to teach them. Okay. Do you remember what the question was? That's a hard one. I didn't have that on the list, but it's very important. That sets the stage for the whole gospel today. What did the lawyer ask Jesus, the teacher, in the gospel? Do you guys know? Put your hand up if you know. If you don't, that's okay. I'm going to tell you. He said, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Right. And then Jesus said, "What is in the law? How do you read it?" What's the law? What was Jesus referring to when he said the law? If there's something we're supposed to do, and Jesus said it's the law, what's he referring to? Like, where do you find that law? Is it written down somewhere here?
In maybe a book of laws, every single country has a book of laws.
Book of laws, right? That's a good answer. Right, it's written down here. Jesus was talking about God's law, which was written down. God told it to Moses, and he had Moses write it down on a stone. And then the prophets are in scrolls. But we have it in a book. So he was referring to something we can go check out, right? What is written in the law? How do you read? And the lawyer, knowing his stuff, he told Jesus, "I'm going to tell you the answer to this one." This is the heart of it, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. That comes from this book. It comes from the book of Deuteronomy. So Jesus knew what he was talking about. The lawyer knew what he was talking about. They both knew what they were talking about. Love God. That's basically what that means. Then the second part, and your neighbor as yourself. That comes from another part of the Old Testament, from Leviticus. And Jesus said, "Good answer. You have answered correctly. Do this and you will live." You asked, "What must I do to live?" I asked you what the law says. You repeated it correctly. Now, that's it. That's all you have to do. But then, it says the lawyer seeking to justify himself. You guys know what that means? Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing. We do it all the time. We want to make sure we're on the right side. We want to make sure we're good, that we've done everything we're supposed to do, and we're off the hook, we might say. We don't want to get in trouble for not doing it right. So he wanted to know, well, who is my neighbor? Who do I have to love as myself? Because that's the commandment. So he was looking for a way out of really keeping the commandment, we might say. If you want to justify yourself, you just want to take care of yourself and say, "I'm good. Forget about it. I passed the test." So that's what he was trying to do. And then Jesus tells him a story. Right? This is the story we heard. It's called the Good Samaritan often. Do you remember something about the story? Jesus says a certain man was going somewhere. Where was the man going? Do you remember, Adrian? Names? Do you remember, Ariella? He was going from Jerusalem to Jericho. So that's important, because we might think, well, if he lives in Jerusalem and he's traveling to Jericho, maybe he's a Jew. Because we don't believe, it's not said that he's a Jew, but from Jerusalem he's traveling, okay. And then something happened to him. He got robbed. He got beaten, and he got left for dead. So there's a crime, a mugging. This guy's dying by the side of the road. And then it says, by certain chance, two people pass by. One's a priest. That's like Father Fred. By chance, walking down and seeing someone lying dead by the side of the road who had just been robbed. And if I went, ooh, and I walked on the other side. That's what the guy did. He avoided him and he walked on the other side of the street to not have to come into contact with him. And then someone else did that, a Levite. You know what a Levite is? It's not a priest, but it's somebody who takes care of the things like we'd say in the altar. It might be like a subdeacon, where they get the censer ready, where they clean, where they organize, and they help with the services. So somebody like that, somebody like, where's the subdeacon? Tristan. Walking down. and seeing the same thing. A guy got mugged and saying, ooh, and walking on the other way because he didn't want to come into contact with him. So two people that serve God and worship God in the temple turned the other way because they didn't want to get involved. And then it says, who was the third person? Maybe you guys can tell me. Any of you up here know? Do you know, Hadrian?
The Samaritan.
Samaritan. That means a person from Samaria. That means not from Jerusalem. And I got to tell you that Samaritans didn't like Jews. We just have to say that, historically. They were enemies. They hated each other. They wouldn't talk to one another. So that's why it's important that that was a Samaritan. So this guy's enemy, this Jewish guy's enemy, it says, was traveling, and he saw the man. And what did he do? Hadrian, you want to tell us what he did?
He helped the Jew.
Right. How did he help him?
He gave him food and bring him somewhere safe.
Brought him somewhere safe. So the guy's mugged. He's robbed. He's lying on the road, left half dead. He stopped and he put oil and wine on his wounds. He bandaged him. He cleaned him up. He put him on his animal, like in his car or whatever, his mode of transportation. He took him to a place where he can rest, like a hospital or a hotel. Okay? He took care of all that. And then he told the innkeeper at the place where he took him, you take care of him, and if I owe anything else, I'll pay you on my way back. So this guy wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to spend, this amount of money and that's it, or I don't have money. Whatever he needs, I'm going to take care of it. That's really important that we hear that, because it goes beyond just me. The commandment says, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, what about your enemy? And what about going beyond what you have? Like anything else he owes, I'm going to pay that too. So this guy went really above and beyond. He took care of an enemy. Right? Wow. There's not a lot we can say about this gospel. I know we're talking, and I'm trying to teach you guys how to hear it. But that's pretty straightforward. That's the commandment. If you are commanded to love God, right, and why is love your neighbor as yourself in there? That's not even in the same place. Because the teaching is you can't love God if you don't love your neighbor. And in this story, your neighbor is your enemy. How do you like that? Aren't we supposed to hate our enemies? Aren't we supposed to fight our enemies? Aren't we supposed to want the worst for them so that we can win? Not according to the gospel. Love your enemy as yourself, or your neighbor as yourself. But then the question, who is my neighbor, right? And that spawned or inspired Jesus to tell that story. So then Jesus asks the lawyer, which one of these three was the neighbor to the one who fell among the robbers? And the lawyer said, the one who had compassion on him, right? And this is what Jesus says. I said we can't say a lot about this gospel because it's all summarized in these words I'm about to say. Jesus says, go and do likewise. You go imitate him, right? Pretty straightforward. He didn't say, what do you think about that? Or let's talk about it. Let's hash this out. Let's weigh the options. Let's look into the matter. No. He said, you go and do likewise. So if you want to have life, that's what you do. Pretty straightforward. And it would be pretty scary to see a person half dead on the side of the road. I'd be tempted to say, I don't want to get involved. I can't get involved. I don't have any money. I might get mugged myself. All these things. Right? But the commandment is to love. And that's what the Samaritan in the gospel did. You guys have any questions about that teaching or about the story? You don't have to, but if you do, I'll help you understand it better. Like I said, it's straightforward. If you remember one thing today, remember, go and you do likewise. What the Samaritan did. What did he do? He loved his neighbor, who was his enemy, as himself, and in so loved God. So that's what we have to do, beloved in Christ, according to this teaching, in order to have life. It's the $1 million question, and it's played out beautifully in Luke chapter 10. I'm going to tell you one thing now about a saint, because it just so happens today is the commemorance of St. John the Almsgiver, or the Merciful, or the Almoner, he's sometimes called. This is just happens to be. We would have had this gospel if it weren't St. John's commemoration today, but it is. So we want to say just a couple of things about him. He was a patriarch in Alexandria. Alexandria was a big, big city hundreds of years ago. Kind of like Washington, D.C. Do you guys know Washington, D.C.? Right? It's big, isn't it? There's a lot of people, and there's a lot of wealth. But along with the wealth, there's a lot of poor people. So he's the patriarch of Alexandria, and a story about him that I love to tell is when he came to the church and he met the people in the cathedral, he told them, I want to meet all those lords that I was sent here to serve. And they said, the lords? What are you talking about? He said, my lords, where are they? Show them to me, introduce me to them. And John meant to go in those parts of the city where you never go, because people don't have any money, and they're sleeping in cardboard boxes, and they smell bad, and they're scary. You don't want to go near them. He wanted to go to the scary part of town to meet the poor people that everyone else had forgotten, because he considered himself their servant. They're my lords, I'm going to serve them. That's the kind of heart that John had. And then this is a funny story. I can't resist telling you this one. Someone came to the church to ask for money. And the guy was begging, right? And it looked like a scam. You know what a scam is? Someone's not telling you the truth. So he was asking for money. John gave him like $20, something like that. And then he came back. The same guy came back, but he disguised himself. He put a hat on. He was dressed a little differently. He was faking a different accent. And he made up a different story, and he asked John for help. And you know what John did? Patriarch John. He said, give it to him. Give him 50 this time. And all of his advisors were like, are you kidding me? This guy's a scam, obviously. It's a really bad scam, and he's trying to rip you off. He said, give it to him. And then a third time, the crook comes back, dressed a different way, with a different story, asking for money, for a different reason. And Patriarch John said, give him 100. Can you believe that? Is he crazy? They were all telling him, he's ripping you off, it's obviously a scam, you're taking money from the church. He said, give it to him. And then something happened. After 3 or 4 times like this, the crook felt really bad, because he said, I'm doing a really bad job here as a scam artist, and this guy's believing me, and his heart was softened, and he repented, and he came back and he gave the money. See? Patriarch John left it in God's hands. And they told him, you know, the guy's ripping you off. And you know what he said? That's not my problem. That's his problem. We're called to treat everyone neighborly and to love. If somebody's lying to me or stealing from me, they're the one with the problem. We have to have the heart to love, and that's how he lived. So I want to mention his story today, because today's his remembrance, and these are the kind of saints we have in the church.